As with my colleagues, I'd like to say thank you to Alliance and thank you to the whole CAP family and thank you to Coutts. It's very exciting to be here. Just a few words about the general history and context of philanthropy in South Africa. We come out of a long history of colonialism, by among others you Brits, and once apartheid was dismantled in the mid-1990s, the whole face of philanthropy changed, whereas before it had been about charitable giving with, quite honestly, quite a paternalistic face. It changed, it had to change into something that was supposed to be more transformative and more empowering. In South Africa, we have 90% of the population who come out of a history of colonialism where they were legislatively excluded from the economy and from urban areas except for certain sorts of work. So that's a huge legacy of underdevelopment to make up. And obviously philanthropy can't fill all of that. But certainly in terms of the work that's been done so far, firstly at the legislative level. Under apartheid, the regulatory environment was absolutely inimical to philanthropy and particularly to international giving into South Africa. The reason for that was because a lot of the resistance to apartheid came from NGOs who were operating inside South Africa. So the funding environment was very strictly controlled by the apartheid government. So once government changed, along with a whole lot of constitutional reform, the whole battery of legislation around giving and around the way civil society NGOs operated changed as well. So corporate giving has always happened in South Africa from the early mining era. One of the things that happened when government changed was that corporate giving was legislated. You've probably all heard of the Black Economic Empowerment Act, which was one of the legislative instruments that was put in place to start changing the balance between rich and poor, between excluded and included, etc., etc. And the Black Economic Empowerment Act, among other things, legislates that listed companies have to give at least 1% of profit after tax into certain causes in the NGO/charity sector. Ironically, that legislation is being changed at the moment, or rather government is trying to change it. Part of the reason for that is a good reason, in that broad-based Black economic empowerment as it was intended hasn't actually worked. What we've got is a small minority of very wealthy Black people that have come up through engaging in empowerment deals. But at the other end of the spectrum, poor people, as some of my colleagues have already said, it's the same in South Africa. Poor people are not any better off, and in fact, in some cases, worse. So one of the reasons for changing the Black Economic Empowerment Act is to try and get it to work better in order to start getting some sort of equity in society. But one of the things that has happened is that the Department of Trade and Industry tried to fiddle around with the 1% for NGOs, for social economic development. And there was a huge outcry from the development sector, so they've changed their minds about that. The rest of it is in flux at the moment, and we're all waiting on the sidelines to see what happens next that we have to combat. Aside from business, we do have, I think I should just take a step back and say we don't have generally good, reliable national statistics about what's going on. But we do have a lot of evidence, and there's quite a debate going on around, is South Africa a really generous society? Have things changed over the last nearly 20 years? We do have a very strong tradition of high net worth individual giving. A lot of that happens under the radar, but there are a lot of kind of old money, white families that have institutionalized their giving. And then getting to the giving pledge, we've got our richest black economic empowerment billionaire, Patrice Motsepe, who has just become the first South African to sign the giving pledge. Then we also have a very strong tradition of community support and giving in communities. Masha mentioned this. The South African form of that is called Ubuntu. And Ubuntu really means care for your fellow human beings. So our famous Nobel laureate, Bishop Tutu, often quotes this. It's about a person can only be a person in relationship to others. And if there's help that is needed, that help must be given. So there's a lot of that happens in communities and in poor communities. And it really helps to build social cohesion. But what we're worried about is that in the last few years, as corruption and the lack of skills and a whole lot of other social turmoil has been happening, those of us who are involved in philanthropy and corporate social investment have been wanting to know, is this kind of community support still going on? What's actually happening there? And CAF Southern Africa is at the moment doing a national study which will partly cover that. Shall I stop there at this point?
Yes, okay, thank you. Thank you, Colleen.